From day one, we are told who we should be, how to live, and what's acceptable. Before we even have a chance to discover ourselves, our society has already drawn those lines for us. But what happens when those lines are keeping us from knowing and embracing who we truly are? Welcome to Unbox Yourself with Samantha Fox, a podcast about unpacking and unlearning everything that's kept you from living as your true self. Through honest conversations about your internal emotional landscape, sexuality, coming out later in life, relationships, and the journey to self-acceptance, we break free from the boxes we never chose. Hello and welcome to Unbox Yourself with Samantha Fox. As I'm sure you know, I hear many, many stories, whether they're from the clients that I work with, or sometimes people just reach out to me via email or sometimes via social media. And recently, a young woman reached out to me to share a story about she and her husband coming out of some, what I'm going to call extremist Christianity, and just really an interesting story. And I started thinking about the number of women that I have worked with that have come out of this evangelical Christianity, I'm going to call it, and how they have moved through, at least the ones that I have worked with, they have moved through this process with their male partners in a way that is kind of different from the way I've seen a lot of couples that are not coming out of religious trauma, purity culture, move through this process. And I've seen a lot of different, I've seen every different way to move through this process of coming out later in life. But I started just thinking about, wow, it's really interesting, those that go through this process of coming out later when they grew up in the evangelical Christian church or any extreme religious church or structure, how there is this support that I see between the couple and kind of an understanding and a support and a friendship and a closeness that I don't always see in those who have not grown up in the church. Now, again, I'm sure this is not across the board, but it just got me thinking, wow, that's so interesting. And what I think is that there is something about being exposed to similar trauma as your partner and really just knowing how hard it was to actually be who you are, that creates some kind of understanding between the two people and some kind of a bond that is really just so special. I find it actually very moving. As I've been thinking about this young woman, Alyssa, reached out to me a second time and said that she would love to come on the podcast and share her story. And that is who my guest is today. So I hope you enjoy the episode. Thanks so much for being here. Hello and welcome to Unbox Yourself with Samantha Fox. Today I have Alyssa as my guest, and I'm so excited to have you here and to really just hear about your story, which is so interesting to me. There are so many points of your story which have caught my attention and leave me super curious. So I would love, Alyssa, if you could share a little bit just about how old you are today and then a little bit of your background and like how you got here.
Okay. So I'm 39 and a half. I'll be 40 soon. Okay. So I have a lot of childhood trauma, I guess you could say. And so I've been in and out of therapy for years. Most of that was therapy through the church that I was a part of, counselors, biblical counselors, not actual trauma clinical therapists. So I started clinical therapy when I was pregnant with my firstborn, which was when I was 30, so 9 years ago. And that's when I really started realizing how trauma affects the brain, I guess you could say. And so then, in and out of therapy, postpartum, I was pregnant and nursing for a good 7 years, had 3 kids. My husband and I were married when I was 30. And then we had a honeymoon baby. So I had my first at 31, and then we just kept having babies. I stayed at home, didn't work. And me and my husband, we both grew up in similar churches, which is independent fundamental Baptist churches. So in different states, but both in the Midwest.
Okay.
And then we met at a conservative Christian college in the South. And we were friends pretty much immediately. And we were friends for a long time before we even tried to go romantic. I mean, for like 7 years, but it's kind of the college we were with, it's like you don't really date. Like, I don't know, like there's a very awkward way that dating was done at our college. And so it wasn't until later when we had more freedoms, like working in the city that we were in and stuff like that, that we started to like come together. We watched a show that was like our favorite show, and then, just me and him, and then kind of like realize, oh, maybe I do like him or maybe I do like her. And so started coming together that way. And so when we started our romantic relationship, it like worked. Like there were so many sparks and like so much of us and our journey felt like normal, like finally. And so we were like, okay, this is it. Like, we've known each other for so long. Let's get married. So we were married within like 10 months. And then we had a baby right away, and started doing the family thing and all that.
So can I just rewind you? I want to rewind you back even further. Prior to your husband, who was your friend first, did you have any other relationships with anybody? Like, did you have any other boyfriends or crushes or anything like that?
I had kind of crushes. Like, well, I would never allow myself to crush on somebody who wasn't a Christian. And so there was that. I had really strong feelings towards good girlfriends that I would be devastated if they didn't talk to me and stuff like that. And then I always picked the most popular guy to have a crush on. But I didn't even care if they liked me or not. So there was like that awkwardness there as well. And then also, another interesting part, like sexuality was so bad. It was so wrong. I have a larger chest. And so if I wore too low of a shirt, I was, tempting everyone and all of my brethren. And so there was like, a very shamed way of thinking about sexuality from the time I was very young. I mean, even going to church camp as an 8-year-old, like you had to wear long shorts and you had to wear shirts and shorts when we went swimming. And, like it was just very bad
Yeah,
to
don't
show
show
any
any.
part of your body, even as a
Yeah,
child, because
you learned that really
yeah,
early.
very, very early. And so, and like I was abused, because my parents weren't really in the church, and like they were, but they weren't. So like they got saved right when I was like a baby and got back into church or whatever. And it was an independent.
What does that mean that they got saved? Because I don't know
So they
anything.
gave their life to Jesus, or they accepted Jesus into their hearts, is kind of the terminology that was
It
used.
means that you've been saved.
Correct.
And what is that? Then what? Okay.
Then you start going to church and changing your life, and women, adjust their standards to the standard of the church, which is the God standard of wearing skirts and dressing modestly. And the man, takes charge and leadership of his family and, make sure nobody does wrong or against God. And, no smoking, no drinking, no bad entertainment. Music can only be a certain type of music, not too beaty, not too drummy. Because even like, basically Southern gospel was even too liberal for us at the time when my parents were going to church when I was a baby. So they loosened up as we went on and accepted Southern gospel, like well into my adult years, but loosened up.
Were you one of many children or?
So my parents, they had a tumultuous background as well, grew up in a lot of abuse and situations. They actually got married because they were pregnant with my oldest brother. And then, came into the church and started living like they were Sunday school teacher, bus driver, bus captain, like all of these things until a infidelity on my mom's part came out from early on in the marriage. And then my dad decided to just turn to alcohol and drugs and abuse when I was about 7. And then they stopped going to church, but I would still go and my brothers would still go. But I was always the one that like went. My brothers stopped going. They were older than me and I always went for friends. And, there were friends of our family that would like come pick me up or, because I was still interested in going. So like I still tried to be the good person and the good kid in that way. So at home, I kind of lived 2 lives. I was one way at church where I was modest and I, thought of these things. And at home, like I would still think these things, but like my shorts were short, my, shirts were tank tops, like, all the things.
No one said it. Like your parents didn't say anything about that.
Oh no, like at this point, they really didn't care, And so, comes to a point of like, I was abused, unfortunately by my brothers. And we went to a Christian therapist when I was like 14, and I finally told what happened. And the message that was given to me was maybe I shouldn't wear a short of shorts or sit with my legs open in front of my brothers because, I'm the one that's tempting them.
Oh my gosh.
And so like there's just like this like crazy Christian purity thing that like it's all the woman's fault for being so beautiful and the man has no control once he's tempted sexually.
Yeah.
So it's just like that's kind of like the thinking.
Yeah.
And so me even having a sexuality, like I couldn't like I just pushed it down. Like I didn't even know what arousal was or why I was so interested in these beautiful girls and why I loved to be dared at slumber parties to, flash someone or touch a boob or, kiss someone or like all these things that were okay in a girl setting. But oh my gosh, if it was a boy, like it was so wrong. Like I could never, ever do that with a boy. So,
These girls, like where you would have a slumber party and have these moments of kissing someone on a dare or whatever, were these friends all also part of the same church?
they were not, they were my public school friends.
Okay, so you went to public school. So in public school you are exposed to all different kinds of kids.
Correct. Yeah. But I would always, you know, come back to the church and ask for forgiveness and feel bad and feel like I wasn't saved because I struggled so much with temptation and all these things. And that's like most of my like formative teen, like young teen and teen years. But when I was 18, I started going back to the Independent Fundamental Baptist Church to get my life right and rededicated myself to the Lord. And this is the terminology they would use. And so in these churches, they're independent based on one pastor and his vision from God and his standards that he reads from the Bible. And most of them are pretty similar. Sometimes they have relationships with other pastors and churches that we're okay to talk to them. But any other denomination, and even some other independent fundamental Baptist churches, if they didn't have the same standard as us, we were holier than them and they're wrong. And
Alyssa, share what you shared with me about. I asked you if earlier before we started recording, if you would consider, or if your sect of religion was considered evangelical Christianity, and what you said to me about that.
so growing up, the evangelical movement in Christianity was too liberal for our church that we went to. And so it's just really funny how, like, I mean, technically they would consider us, I think, evangelical, but we would never consider ourselves. Well, I say we, but like, I'm not a part of that anymore.
Yes.
And so it's really wild how pious I guess they think they are, and that their religion is more pure. And their thoughts on the Bible and their interpretations of the Bible are just righteous and more righteous than anybody else. So
Learned also that it's based on like one man's interpretation, or right, something.
yeah. And a lot of times these men didn't even really go to a Bible college or a seminary either. They were brought up in the church. They had a calling on their life. They studied under the pastor that was before them and maybe got like an online Bible degree somewhere or were honored with a degree because of their ministry. And yeah, like there was no true learning of the scripture or of the original languages of the scripture. Like if he had a hard time with a girl with big boobs, everyone had to wear their shirts up to their neck. But that wasn't the reasoning. The reasoning was, you know, you're tempting all the men. And so you have to be careful. So it's wild how the women just prescribed to it. The women would teach the women, how not to be Jezebels per se, or we weren't really allowed to have a sexuality. And it was very normal to tell young girls who were getting married that sex probably won't feel good for a while. It's all about the man's pleasure. It doesn't really matter if we get pleasure. Um,
And was
and
pleasure like also a sin, or was
pretty
like, did you
much.
learn that? Yeah.
Yeah. So any girl that liked to make out or kiss a guy or even, go to first base, um, she was labeled as, a harlot and a whore and,
Wow.
a sexual temptress. And, like that was just like not acceptable at all for women. But men, I mean, it's just normal for men. Like it's so hard for them because women are so beautiful. And she tempted him by the way she was dressing, So like it's just like it's so messed up. So messed up.
Yeah. I mean, so much inequality and so much, taking away all the power. I mean, kind of delegating power to women in a way that makes them feel like they have power, but it's really taking away their power.
Yes, yes. And like my husband grew up in a similar church and like he didn't even realize that this was what the girls were being taught because like my sister-in-law went to the same church as him and she was like, "Oh yeah, we definitely had the same idea thrown at us in our church." Even though like our churches and the people were completely different. Because there are some like main theologians that all of these independent fundamental Baptist people like look to from like the 50s and early 1900s and stuff like that in their teachings. So there is some similarities between that, some of the standards that they get. But then they can also go off on a whim and say, well, I think that God is saying this, and I'm the man of God with the calling. And so then they kind of branch out to their own standards here and there. Anyways, my husband says that he was taught that they were wrong if they pursued a girl sexually because they were bringing her down. A girl should not have sexual feelings. And if you're inciting that in her, then you're the problem. And so, like, but it's weird because we were told we were the problem if we incited the sexual feelings of them. So, like, it was just very shameful on both sides. But even though those were shameful, it was very more acceptable for a man to play around and be forgiven for having, sexual, things with a girl, but a girl immediately became impure. You're no longer pure for your husband. Like the cookie, like, I don't know if you've heard of this, but like, you know, they would use this idea that like, you know, how many people do you want to touch your cookie before you eat your cookie? Like you're the cookie. Your husband doesn't want all these hands over his cookie before you're married. Like, I mean, it's just like
Like,
so that's like what we grew up in. And so like I didn't even touch myself sexually until I was 26 years old. I didn't even know arousal or like an orgasmic feeling until I
so
was
would you say, so
well
would you
into my
say it was,
20s.
would, is it just that like those feelings, they couldn't even come up in you because of all of these learnings that you had absorbed and taken in and believed in? It was like you had no access. Like you literally had no access to yourself because of all of these layers of the things that you learned.
Yes, and all the shame that anything
Yeah, the
sexual brought
shame.
up. And so, like, even then, it was very easy for me to not explore with men because I really wasn't interested. It was very easy
Yeah.
for me to be sexually pure and not have boyfriends and not be interested in having boyfriends. I mean, also, my dad was very abusive and an alcoholic. And, like I was scared of men for a very long time too. So there's like that aspect of it as well. So, yeah. So, like, between the religious trauma and the childhood trauma and family trauma, like, I was just like the perfect Christian girl who was just waiting.
Just in all of that, I mean, you mentioned the sleepover parties, and I get it. Like there was no feelings of attraction that were coming up or desire or anything like that. Did you, in those years between college and getting married, have feelings that came up for any women? Like feelings of desire?
So it was very blinding I was blinded to what those feelings were. So there was like strong pulls towards girl friendships, and more
Hmm.
hurt feelings if that girl was unkind or rude or didn't take time for me or, like that kind of thing. Whereas with guys, like, if he was a crush or something, like I really was like, oh, I'm a little bit hurt and I would cry, but it was more so like facilitated because like that's what I saw other girls doing. And so I had to like kind of act that way or feel jealous or feel. But really those natural feelings of that was more so towards some girlfriends that I now realize I was attracted to, if that makes sense.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. So I like, and even then, like there's movies and shows and musical people that were ungodly that I loved. I love their bodies. I love the way they move. I felt excited when I watched them, but that was wrong and that was ungodly. So I would avoid that entertainment. I would avoid looking at them. I would avoid because, but like I didn't have the like understanding of myself to really be like, that's why I like that. That's why I like her. So my husband, he was my first boyfriend, my first like make out session, my first everything. And I was his
Yep.
first as well. And so,
Yep.
we explored sexuality together. And like we say first in adulthood, because I mean, there were times where we would kiss someone or, touch someone, but like it was very adolescent. And even then we were very shamed into like asking for forgiveness and, all of the things or whatever.
Yes. Now it was allowed. It's your husband. You're allowed to
Yes, we're allowed to
explore.
not feel shame. Like we're going to spend our lives together and it's all good. So there's that aspect of it. So anyway, so this past summer in therapy, finally found a good therapist that did not try to push me to visit the trauma of my sexual trauma, I guess. And I knew that I was having a lot of um, reactive feelings and outburst of like anger and frustration towards my husband and my kids um, because of a lot of like childhood trauma. And so like I went to therapy like this summer specifically to address that. And I had heard this podcast and it was actually like a Christian podcast and it was like um you need to address your sexual story to be able to talk to your kids about sexual things. And you have to have the comfortability with your own story to be able to even talk to your kids about it. Cause it was like a podcast coming out of purity culture. Sex is not bad. Sex is normal. God created it, like all of these like ideas. And so like people who grew up in purity culture were having a hard time, like not wanting to teach their kids purity culture, but not knowing what to do. And so like
Yeah.
one of the podcasts I had listened to was that. And so we were still in church. We were in a very liberal church. It was independent, like not, I don't know the word now. I want to say independent, but it was like based in like the Church of Christ, but it was like non-denominational. That's the word. So we kind of hopped the fence a little bit and very liberal in the way we grew up. Like people don't even think we go to church, even though we were going to church because of the type of church we were going to. So anyway, so like I start tackling this sexual story of mine and naming the abuse, but also naming the play and starting to realize, my gosh, that's why I love doing that at those sleepovers. Oh my gosh, I liked her. I had a huge crush on her. Like, and there were times in like church camp that girls would like ice me out because they would claim I was staring at them when they were like changing. And I was like, oh my gosh, I probably was. Like, like there was just all of these things that were like, I like girls. What? Like it was like finally clicking for me. And I was just like, holy what? Anyways, it was really, really interesting because I felt very like concerned because like I'm married, I have 3 kids. I am 39 years old. Like, and I'm like, what's my husband gonna think about this? Like, so then I start kind of like rationalizing it, because I've looked at porn, and stuff like that. And me and my husband both did. It wasn't something we necessarily like felt bad about, I guess you could say. It was just something that with young kids, we can't always be together, so it was just like an acceptable thing for us. And we had already started deconstructing our faith anyways. And so we were, you know, that was one thing that we were already like okay with, I guess you could say. Him more so than me, I still felt bad. I still felt like I shouldn't be looking at other things and I should be honoring him and only being attracted to him because that's, what you're taught in monogamy and in this particular religion. And so, um, yeah, so we were talking at coffee on a Saturday morning this summer in June, and I was like, I have a gay cousin and he has a gay cousin that are in, you know, homosexual marriages, and like we love them, and like my family has mostly shunned that person. And his family is kind of accepting, but they still think she's wrong and, whatever. And so like we were talking about them and I was like, yeah, I can see how people can be confused. Because like you're watching a sexual like thing and like, everyone looks good, everyone, so like, I can see how people would want to turn towards the same sex. And he was like, "What?" Like, "What are you saying?" And I didn't even really like I couldn't even really like accept like that I was attracted to girls. And he was like, "So are you saying sexuality could be like on a spectrum?" And I was like, "Yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe I can see that where like, you know, you could be attracted to both, but like it's stronger for one side versus the other, like, and he's like, "Really?" And I was like, "Yeah." And so he's like, "We need to talk about this tonight." And I was like, "Okay." And I was like, "Oh man, he found me out." And I was nervous the whole day because he had to go to work. And so he gets back from work and we're talking. And then he basically tells me like, I'm gay. And I was like, "What?" He asked me some questions, but like, and he started crying and he was really like having a hard time with getting this out. And I was like, "What is it? Like, are you done with me?" Like, I'm like, I don't know what's coming. And then he's like, "I am mostly attracted to men. Like, you're the only woman that I've ever been actually attracted to." And I was like, "What? Okay. Like, hold on. What's going on here?"
How did you feel when he said this to you? I know first you were worried, but like that
Yeah.
he wasn't accepting you. But then once he said, "I'm mostly attracted to men and you're the only woman I've ever been attracted to," what was that like for you?
Honestly, I felt honored a little bit. I'm not gonna lie. It was kind of a little ego thing. Like, I'm the only girl. Hey. But then, like, the reality of it, like, also, like, I don't know. I just felt so much compassion for him because, like, I felt like it was a very, like, big thing, and I could see the struggle in even, like, saying it to me, and
Yeah.
how much, like, and, like, since then, we learned about internal homophobia and,
Yeah.
like, all of these things that we've worked through, um, and accepting our sexuality and, like, just in our brains, let alone like with each other. And so like I understood the turmoil he was feeling. I understand how hard because like I still had yet to actually tell him I am sexually attracted to women.
Yeah.
Like I was just talking about it could be on a spectrum and I could see that and like all these different things. And so like I still hadn't even really like fully accepted myself and
Right.
like I was still like coming to it.
You were struggling. Yeah.
And I just had so much compassion. I mean, he's my best friend, and like, we talked a lot about it and like how he would handle it and how it was, compartmentalized, like the porn that he watched, like, that kind of stuff. Like that's where he found, fulfillment for that part of him. And, never would tell me and would hope I would never see his phone or find it or, and then we started talking about like crushes and people and childhood experiences and opening up to each other and then also talking about like how much this like how hard it is to even accept these things for ourselves because of faith and
Yeah.
like because we were taught that God hates homosexuals and homosexuality.
Yeah.
So maybe not
Yeah.
homosexuals because you hate the sin and not the sinner is what they would always say.
Right.
But like you
Right.
are ultimately hating the sinner in this particular thing because we're realizing how much of this is actually our identity. Like this is in us and it's been with us since we were young, and like from the beginning of like any perk of sexuality. Like I can even remember a girl. I just thought she was so beautiful in church and I was so hurt that she didn't want to be my friend. And like I was 8 years old, and like realizing that that was a crush was like mind blowing to me.
Yeah.
And so, and when I did look into porn, I wanted to see the girls is what I wanted to
Yeah.
see. I didn't care
Yeah.
about the men and their dicks. I wanted to see breast and pussy. Like just to put it out there. I'm sorry, you can change this up if you need to. But like it was just wild to me that like I had never accepted that part of myself and allowed myself to even like say that's what I liked, And
Yeah.
so,
Or to like it, you knew it because
yeah,
that's what you wanted, but it didn't rise to the level of consciousness of any kind of meaning.
yes, yeah. Like it didn't mean that like that's what I wanted sexually.
Right.
So, and like honestly, like even guys, like I mean, I was still interested in seeing their, dicks and stuff and like wondered, different things, but also because of different abuses that took place, like I kind of shunned it as well. So
Hmm?
when things were going really well for me and my husband, like I was like, okay, like this is awesome. I do like this. So like I still find my sexuality as bisexual. So after all of this therapy, even early on and opening up to each other, my husband was really interested in non-monogamy. I was very scared of non-monogamy because I felt like because I'm the only girl he's been attracted to, and he's never been allowed to explore a relationship with a man or try anything with a man, that he was going to want that more than me, and that scared me.
Yeah.
So, um, like, but also, like, it wasn't his fault that he never got to explore that. It wasn't his fault, like, we were kind of just like, and it's just funny to me. Sorry, side note. A lot of our friends who got married around the same time as us, a lot of them are also queer and found each other. And it's really interesting to me how so many of our friends are also queer and they've either
Yeah.
gotten married and they're both queer and found each other in that friendship. And so it's like the queer people were drawn to each other without actually knowing
Yeah.
we were all queer. It's very wild. So, because
Yeah.
some people were a little bit more open about it, even though they knew it was wrong. But then some people were, very never would tell anyone, which was me and my husband.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. I
we
mean,
did
it
the
wasn't even really an awareness level. I mean, maybe for
for
your husband, he was more
yeah,
aware, but for you, it wasn't even like rising to awareness.
no, yeah. I really lucked out with a great therapist who has a lot of experience in the queer community, a lot of experience with um, people who come from religion coming out queer, um, and also just non-monogamy and like relationships like that. And so she has been a great like support through all of this. And so, we were and we're researchers, like me and my husband. Like we love like if we find a topic that we need to know something about, we find everything we can read about it within like days. So we can hyper focus very quickly if we are
Yeah.
interested in something and want to figure something out. Um, and so like, we kind of jumped into the journey of non-monogamy and it was more so me letting him kind of explore. I didn't really know if I wanted to explore, but once he kind of went out and did it, I don't know, it was almost like it gave me, I don't know, like acceptance. And I was like, maybe I do want to explore. So like, and that was a couple months ago. And we're at this point now where he got really sexually confused with me. And it kind, like
What does
there
that
was a,
mean? What does that mean? Sorry. What do you mean?
so basically like was having problems being aroused by me, if
Okay.
that makes sense. So,
Yeah.
but he was also on different medications, and so we weren't really sure, like, but I still longed to be with a man on top of the girl connections that I had made. And so, anyways, so like now it's kind of interesting because, so like I am now dating both genders and he's dating one gender. And so like it's kind of wild because he's kind of burnt out because he really didn't make the greatest connections. He had good experiences, but at the same time, he really wants a friend in all of this, and he's only found really hookups in all of this. And we're doing it obviously very safely and sexually safe and all of the things. He's even on medicine that for prep and like all of the things. So I think part of it too is we are in a small Midwest city, and there's not a lot of out queer people. Like he really encounters a lot of closeted queers that are looking for hookups and not friendships, or and so where I encounter a lot of couples looking for a unicorn where the girl is bisexual but the guy is not. And so like there's just it's a very interesting world that is so different than what we had. By the end of summer, we were no longer going to church. We, told our community that like, hey, we're taking a break. We told the pastor our views and beliefs no longer align with the church, so we're kind of taking a step back, just so like they didn't pursue us
Good.
and start asking questions and stuff. So we took a big step back from our community that we had, and we've kind of built a little bit of a community with some people that we knew who were out, but unfortunately, there's not a lot of men that are out, but there's a lot of men on Grindr looking for
A hookup.
men. Yeah,
Yeah.
a hookup. So I have found more community and support from women and friends, just friends, but he has not. And so, like, I feel like he, in his lack of support and lack of good connections, even wanted to stop being non-monogamous and just not even try anymore. And even though he's still very attracted to men, like he still would want to be with a man, but he doesn't want to do it the way we've been doing it because he's not finding, any satisfaction in
Yeah.
connections.
Yeah. Yeah. So
And
interesting.
so, yeah. And so like with me, like, and it's just easier, I think, for girls in general to be connected emotionally. And like, like I think I even like listened to one of your podcasts recently that was like, um, how quickly lesbians tend to take it, and you really talked about the 2 years, like waiting 2 years till you know someone, until you jump into something. Um, like it is very easy for women to like build that emotional connection, um,
Yes.
especially when there's sex involved.
Correct.
And so, like I'm aware of that, but I also know like me and my husband, we're still very committed to our marriage and to our friendship and to being anchor partners in this. We kind of call ourselves E&M, ethical non-monogamy. We know that we're not looking for a replacement of our connection. We are each other's best friend. We share every aspect of our life with each other. Um, and I know, like, when we started talking before we recorded, you were saying how interesting it is that a lot of like religious partners who came out of the church together or, came out as homosexual to each other later in life, like how supportive they are of each other. And I think it's because in a lot of these Christian environments where growing up, you see a lot of hypocrisy from the people who claim to be the best Christians in the church. And so you're so confused because they hurt you or you see them hurt people, yet they're praised and put on this pedestal. And you don't really see a lot of the biblical teachings in these people's lives, yet they're the ones teaching it. And so and there's a lot of religious trauma, even if it's not necessarily purity culture or sexual trauma. There's a lot of emotional trauma. There's a lot of like, manipulation and like a lot of things that, control is like the biggest thing in these
Yeah.
churches is
Yeah.
having control over people and what they are allowed to do. And so like, I feel like it's so easy for me and my husband to have so much empathy towards each other for like me never knowing and allowing myself to know that I liked women sexually, and him never being allowing himself to explore men and to have an emotional connection with a man, or even sexual connection with a man, And so like, there's so much like love for that person and understanding of what they went through as a child
Yeah.
emotionally, and knowing that if anybody else were to find out, they would cut you off and make you feel like the worst sinner ever, and that you're going to hell.
Sad.
And it's like, we're going to be that person's person. We're not going to let you feel what we know these people can do to you, and we're going to support you because it was not your fault. And so like, there's just like that understanding, I feel like, and that really only comes from people who have done the hard work of asking the questions they were never allowed to ask, being honest about what they saw and what they see does not make sense in the Bible, because there are still people who are like blindly following it. And when their partner comes out, they do shun them, and they don't find that understanding and empathy because it's just wrong. And they never even ask the question of, is this religion wrong? Maybe this religion is wrong,
Yeah.
So yeah, so there's that aspect of it too. But I do feel like that, from my understanding, because we do have a lot of friends from college, two couples that got married a year before us, both came out. One is bisexual woman, one is gay man, and they got divorced, but they're still each other's person. They still support each other. They still talk every day because they know their community's gone.
Yeah.
They are each other's community as
Yeah.
they build queer community and relationships with other people, because they understand the separation that is caused, by the church and by this religion. Like, even the parents won't accept the man. And, like, he doesn't even talk to his parents because he's such a, you know, shame to God and the religion, and a shame to them now, because now they're responsible for their child now going against God, because that's how we're taught in this religion, like so like, it's wild.
Yeah.
And
What?
and then the other couple, they're both queer. So she's non-binary and he is gay, and they're staying married. They're in a lavender marriage, and they're, ethical non-monogamy, and like, they have found that they're each other's person, but they've also built a very awesome queer community together. And they're very supportive of each other. They're each other's best friend. And they said for legal reasons and even like safety reasons, they're staying married and staying each other's person. And, it makes sense for insurance and all sorts of things. And so, yeah, like, it's nice knowing them. And we have reconnected with them and heard their stories and shared our story. And so we've found community in places we didn't realize we would find
Yeah.
it as well. And like, it's still interesting because we brought our kids up to be Christian and know God and know Jesus. And coming into this next holiday season is just very interesting, because right now I want nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
All I find there is hurt and pain
Mm.
and shame, like, in in we were taught to hate ourselves because God hates sin and we are sinners. But then the first greatest commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. And then the second one is like unto it, to love your neighbor as you love yourself. However, I was taught not to love myself. I was taught to hate myself. But God still loves me, and I'm supposed to love my neighbor as I love myself. But like, and then they would use these, like, they would talk about this verse and talk about, like, the reason that you go sin is because you love yourself more than you love God. And so you have, like, it was just such a like
Yeah.
circular reasoning, that ultimately the center was hate yourself because you're a horrible person and you don't deserve anything but hell.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, like, it was just like, I don't want anything to do with that anymore. I don't want anything to do with a savior. I don't want anything to do with all of these standards that nobody in this world can even keep. Like, I'm done with it. And I find so much freedom
I'm so
Like,
happy.
it's so funny because, like, we have other friends who deconstructed years ago and kind of told us they don't believe anymore, but they're like Harrodo and they're, but they have 3 kids too. And so they got their children out of church way earlier than we did. And so, like, it's just funny how their kids see all of the hypocrisy of their family who are believers and talk about it. And so, like, it's I don't know. It's so interesting, like, because I still have my kids talking to me like, "Can you pray and ask for no bad dreams?" And I'm like, "Okay," and I start talking about more so how our thoughts can make our dreams have certain, aspects to them. And so let's think of good things and let's, think of happy things and not scary things, And so, like, it's a very weird position that we are in because our kids know Jesus
Yeah.
and they know God and they know a lot of the Bible, but
These
also
kids? How old are they?
they're 8, 6, and 4.
Okay. I mean, they're still young enough that you could, you can deconstruct with them,
Yes, yeah.
right?
So we're trying to find that balance. But also my husband's family is very religious and they're concerned that we're not in church anymore. And they're concerned for our kids and want to talk to our kids about salvation because they don't think we're going to. And, like we told them they're not allowed to and to please respect that. And they do know. And we have talked to them about it. And so, like, it's just like, I don't know. There's a lot of battles ahead in this
Yeah.
journey because we are not, out to them because we know what that's going to bring and we're not ready to tackle that with
Yeah.
them. And so it's just like it's just wild.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like there's still like we're both still in therapy. We have amazing therapists that are in our corner and help us see things and, tackle through our own emotions and find our grounding so that we know how to speak about things. And then also like because another thing too is like parents are like the end all in this like religion. And you always honor your father and your mother and you always obey them. Um, and like there's not really an age on that requirement. And so, yeah. And so, like, these parents in this religion, expect their adult children to do exactly what they say or give the, that come to them for guidance and then do what their guidance is. And so, like, his parents are so hurt that we've made some big changes in our life, like not going to church and career moves and schooling moves that we never went to them for guidance. And it's like, well, we know what you're going to say and we don't agree. So I'm not going to come to you for guidance.
Yeah, I want to ask your one question of you, which is, you're describing everything so beautifully and just what a um malignant system this is.
Mhm.
That you grew up in. And at one point you said, it's really just all about control, right? Like all of this that we're learning, everything about this whole malignant system is about control. And I
Mhm.
just wanted to ask for you, like, what is the purpose? Like, what is the purpose of that control? Like, I hear you, and there's some power in
Mhm.
control, but like, what for? Like, what what is that for? Like, who is that for? What is it doing? Like, what is the outcome of that control and power? I don't know. I'm really asking you.
Yeah. I wish I had an answer because I don't really get it either. There are these men who think they have a calling from God who become a pastor and now they are the shepherd of this flock and they are now responsible for these people. And so I feel like they think they have to control these people to do God's will like Moses did with the people of Israel, or like, all of these, different biblical men of God, they see themselves as high as them, and that all of the people under them, they are now responsible for, and God will make, I can't remember the phrase that they used to use, but to whom much is given, much will be required. So they think that God has given them all these people to lead. And so now they're required to answer to God for these people in their lives and what they do. So it's like this whole system. And like that's kind of the same with like the parenting and the familial system. you're responsible for your own household. And if your own household can't even follow God, then you cannot be a part of the church. You cannot be like you can't be a deacon. You can't be a man of God if your household is not following God. And so
Yeah.
there's all of these like different teachings and that they take out of context from the Bible that make them feel like they have power. And so now they have this power that's placed on them by God that they have to control all the people that they feel are in their wheelhouse that God is going to make them answer for. Yeah. It's like they think they're priests. Like, the priest would do all the sacrifices for the people and for their sins. And so they think they're in like the modern day priesthood. And even though there are no priests now, technically under Jesus, Jesus ripped the veil of the temple and he's the sacrifice for all, supposedly now. But like, it's just like, it's just so wild. It doesn't make any sense, honestly. But like, I think that that's possibly where this control piece comes in because they think they have a responsibility from God over them
Okay.
in whatever purpose or manner that they relate to them, whether that's from a pastor or from a parent or a husband, and it's usually the man. It's very male focused. Femininity in these cultures of religion is very ungodly, like it's very shunned. It's not okay. But like, if you also look at creation, we were made male and female and both in the likeness of God. So obviously, there are characteristics of a man, that masculinity that God empowers it, but there's also very much a feminine side to God, if you really want to go back that far. But it's like as time went on, you know, these men who put together this scripture that we now call the Bible has cut out most of the femininity of it. And there's so much scripture that they claim is not actual scripture that they've left out and that they keep cutting out to make their vision work. The churches I grew up going to were King James only, 1611, but they don't even use the 1611 Bible because nobody understands that wording in English language anymore. But they're King James only. And like, if you look at King James, and what he was about and what he was trying to do with all of these, you know, philosophical Bible scholars putting together this scripture, like it's actually pretty evil. And he was just after control and cutting down feminine women and women who were against a lot of things that he was doing, and he was trying to reshape society to honor him most. And he did that by cutting out some scripture and putting together the holy word of God. And like, it's just wild to me. So what happened for the 1600 years before that? What were the Christians reading and looking at? And then before there was ever even any written word, how did God talk to people? Really? It's just like they cut out the spiritual side of God once Jesus came and these words came. And like, it's just very, I don't know. Like, it's wild to me. And
Yeah.
I don't have any, I don't know, like I really don't care to figure it out right now. I mean, maybe some point I might come back to understanding faith, but at this point, like I don't want to hear anything about it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't even know that there is like a way to understand it. It's just so, I mean, it's really wild. Especially as somebody who grew up, culturally Jewish, but without religion. So
hmm
just culturally, but it's so wild to listen to all of this. It's like
hmm
a whole nother universe. And it's so painful to listen to what people go through and to what your husband has gone through and what you've gone through. And I mean, it's just like, oh gosh, like, I mean, it just feels to me like at your most vulnerable point in life where you are a young child and dependent upon people for your survival, they get right in there in those earliest moments with this teachings that have to do with fear
hmm
because you do need to survive and you do need people to take care of you. And like, that's when they get in there with these teachings and with these beliefs, and they instill them so early that there's never been any other ideas before these ideas have come
Yeah.
in. And when you're so vulnerable because you're so little, I mean, there's no choice. Like, you have to adhere to these things because this is the only way you're going to survive. And because we're human, we are built to survive. Like, our systems are built to make sure we're going to survive. So we'll do whatever that takes, and that it can take so many years of people's lives and just give them these, just awful feelings of shame about who they are. I mean, it's just all so painful. So
Okay.
I just want to say you are so brave. I mean, I'm so, I'm proud of you. I mean, I don't know you, but I'm so proud of you for going and getting help and trying to work through some of your trauma and finding a good therapist and talking to your husband about this, idea of fluidity in sexuality. Gave him then this permission to be who he was, and how the two of you are navigating this together and building queer community and finding other ethically non-monogamous couples, also with the same background. I mean, it's like so beautiful and it's so hopeful. And
Mhm.
I really appreciate you coming on and sharing this story, because I think there are so many people that are needing to hear this,
Mhm.
especially from your background and from, where you come. Just so many people need to hear this, to know that it's okay, that they're okay, that they're beautiful, they're
Yes.
perfectly perfect who they are. There's nothing
Yes.
wrong with them.
No, there is nothing wrong with him. And nothing
Yeah,
wrong with me. Like,
nothing wrong with you. Yes, nothing wrong with them. Yeah, so beautiful.
yes.
Thank you so, so much, Alyssa, for being here and for sharing your story.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
And I wish you and your husband and your kids just, a lot of freedom and a life living outside of all of those boxes, like for the
Yes.
remainder of time. Unpacking
Thank
the
you.
boxes and leaving the boxes
Yes.
behind.
Yes, we are leaving the boxes behind for sure.
So good. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for spending this time with me on Unbox Yourself with Samantha Fox. If this episode resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a review. It helps more folks find these conversations. If you're ready to unbox from something that's keeping you stuck, I would love to support you. You can find the application to the show at unboxyoursexuality.com. Let's stay connected. Find me on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Lesbian Curiosity Coach. Give me a follow and join the conversation. Remember, we only have this one time through. Why not unbox yourself and let your true self shine in all its beautiful glory?